Let's see together some common mistakes in post-production. Number one, destroy informations. Now, for example, in this case, we have a post-production file that has the base has a 32-bit render, which is inside a smart object. Now, even if we have this 32-bit render inside the smart object, the file we are working with is a 16-bit file. And this will allow us to do a proper post-production because mainly every single option here is available about filters, about adjustments, and so on. But still, we have a 32-bit file into a smart object. Why that? Because if we then double click in there, we can open the 32-bit file and we can still define, you can still work on the exposure. For example, if we feel that some areas are overexposed or underexposed. And so a main mistake, a very common mistake could be that we take the so-called, smart object and then we rasterize it because maybe we want to, spend less memory space on the hard drive, or maybe because we are happy with the result and that's it. Now, this is a mistake because you cannot go back on 32-bit then, and if there's an error about exposure, you cannot fix it anymore. And as you should know, so point number two, common mistake, trying to fix exposure on a 16-bit file or an 8-bit file. You cannot do that. The only way to fix exposure and gamma is on a 32-bit. So the right thing to do is to keep the smart object, and if you want to change the exposure, you need to go inside it and bring with you some masks, some selections, and then use the exposure adjustment here to do whatever you want to do, or the gamma is the same. Then when you get the result you want, you click on the X, you press yes, and then it will update the main PSB file, which is 16-bit. So point number three, try to avoid contrast. You should keep contrast for the end of the post-production. And the reason is that if you add some contrast too soon, for example, with some curves, you can drag down some black values and drag up some bright values. Then you get some contrast, but see, look at what happens. In the histogram, there's some holes now, and you can check also if you had another curve in the histogram here below the line. And these are missing informations. These are gone. You're not gonna get them anymore, basically. Which means that instead of a nice gradient, now you have a gradient with less colors. And if you keep doing it, if you keep contrasting over and over and over, you will lose more and more informations, and the image will be technically crunchy. That's the term they used, and it's not very good. It's not good at all. So long story short, you should contrast at the end of the post-production in the finalization. And if you can do that, if you accomplish this, you will get many informations, and your image will look a lot better. And by the way, remember that when you use a curved contrast, you always need to change the blending mode from normal to luminosity. Otherwise, the curves will also saturate, will also change the strength of the colors of your image. Point number four, sharpness. Now, you should have some depth of field, some blurriness in the image coming from the render itself by default, because this is how the camera works. But anyway, try to avoid to, increase the sharpness of the image too much. So if you go like to filter, sharpen, smart sharpen, you can see that you can easily get a more sharp look on the image. And sometimes we are kind of, pushed to do that. Try to avoid this kind of stuff completely, because it basically goes against every thing that looks photographic. And a little bit of sharpness may sometimes work on some areas, but to do it on the whole image and to do it with too much strength actually is not the right way. And a way to accomplish nice sharpness could be to create a new duplicate of the final layer with Ctrl Shift Alt E, and then you need to go on Filter, Other, High Pass, and then with the high pass you go with a very, very, very small radius, something like, I don't know, 1 pixel, okay? And then you press OK, and you put this layer in overlay, and this will basically generate nice sharpness, but at least this one can, you can lower the opacity of it, you can mask it and keep it only where you really need it. For example, I don't know, I invert the mask, so this sharpness effect is going away, and then I use a brush to paint it or only with where I want it, maybe where I need to look at and where I have the only area perfectly sharp of the image. Point number 5, saturation. Keep an eye on the strength of your colors. I mean, the saturation of your color, because even if in real life we can see them, through a camera, we don't have the same ability. We don't have the same spectrum of color strength. So sometimes that's the reason why if you desaturate a little bit the final result, it will look a lot better. Now, I'm not telling you this is a rule and you should do this every time, but at least check the strength of the colors in your image. And one thing you can do is to keep your saturation higher on the focus of the image and keep the saturation lower everywhere else. A quick trick to understand the strength of your color, to understand the saturation, is to add on top of your image a new layer and fill it with medium gray color, and then put this layer into luminosity blending mode. And so you will keep the color and the hue of the layer behind this and the luminosity of this gray layer. And then on top of this, you have another layer and you need to fill it with a red color. I mean, this is not important. Could be red, could be green, could be anything, any color you want. I pick red because it's a lot more visible. And so I click on it and then I change the blending mode to hue, and basically this will change every color into red color. And as you can see, now you can get a glimpse of where the saturation is stronger, because you will see more red than the others. Now, point number 6, remember the format video. You need to remember how to save your images. The one for the client should be an 8-bit JPEG, or if you don't want any lossless, a format file, you can save a PNG. If you are working with CMYK colors, then you should save a TIFF file. And when you start working, you can avoid the PSD, and you can easily save just a PSB, which is the second format, and you don't have the 2 gig limitation that you have on the PSD. Remember, it doesn't matter what you do, always save the IC profile. So whoever opens your image, it will see the same result that you have. Last one for today, point number 7, people. Now, I've seen lots of renders ruined by the wrong person or the wrong match in terms of people. And we are going to have an entire webinar on matching people. Okay, so I'm not going to talk a lot about this now, but please guys, remember one thing. It's better to spend a couple of hours looking for the right guy, than, trying to spend 2 hours matching the wrong one. Okay, so I mean, you can take your own pictures, you can go outside and get your own assets. You can download things from the internet, but problem will be about perspective. You will see. Anyway, try to not ruin your renders with the wrong person or with the wrong perspective, the wrong lighting, and try to be as as picky as you can when you choose the persons. And also I would try to avoid to have so many different people when you start. Just one good element, just one good person, just one good match, it's enough most of the time, even to tell a story, even to have a balance point maybe, or a focus point. Or like in this case, an image from Dario from one of our master classes. This guy is the balance point, and together with him we are following this strong lines, and we are looking at people training on the field. So it took time, it takes time to find the right elements here, but at the end it worked out pretty well, and I'm pretty happy about the results. So Dario did a very good job. But it took time, probably 3-4 hours to find the right elements, the right people, the right photos. So this is everything for this video. Next one.